everypony, MuseScript here. Back on the 10th of December 2015, I had my first concept for the heart shell with this image. And now, more than 10 years later, I have not only 3 completed audio dramas, but multiple shorts and specials for this AU. I don't have a problem, I swear. So what now? Today is also the 9th anniversary of my channel, so I reckon it's about time I showcase a timeline video of the Nistverse as a celebration. And if you're coming to this video without watching anything from this AU, what are you doing here? Go back and watch from the heart shell. For everyone else who's caught up in a way but wants things clarified, this video will cover everything starting from Hexar's banishment up until Rainbow and Nistee's happy ending. So I'll be going through all 26 episodes, 11 shorts, 3 comic dubs, the epilogue, and the movie. Though I will not be including the Christmas specials from the Heart Shell or the Color Goddess since those aren't canon to the storyline. I will be adding the flashbacks of the latter since that is canon to Tenebris' story, though that's also shown in Tenebris the movie, so that's further proof. With such a big video though, how am I going to narrate all of it? Well, here's the best part. I'm not actually going to be narrating this alone. So sit back and relax as me and my friends take you through the complete timeline of the Nistverse.
Many thousands of years ago, 3 goddesses ruled the land of Equestria, before the pony tribes had come together. Their names were Hurica, Satyra, and Lumina. Hurica, the Pegasus goddess, helped the Pegasi with the weather. Satyra, the Earth Pony goddess, helped with nature, and Lumina, the Unicorn goddess, helped with light and darkness. On the 7,000th year of Equestria's conception, a baby god was born into the family. His name was Hexar. As he grew more powerful, he became the god of virtue in charge of Equestria's goods. However, ponies began to go against his powers, which in return tainted said powers. Over time, his 7 components turned into 7 evils, and one day he decided to take that to his advantage and force the ponies to destroy each other. This had gone on for quite some time. The goddess's first attempt was to break 2 of the ponies from his spell by making them both into a mixture of all 3 races, Hesperus and Aurora, as alicorns. They did well for breaking the spell off of the ponies for 100 years, until Hexar got too powerful. With no other choice, Hexar's sisters then banished him to the surface. This was almost fatal for Hexar as his age caught up with him, and he shrunk down to an old stallion. He struggled to find a place to stay until he found the castle of Canterlot. Queen Aurora and King Hesperus took him in and looked after him, not knowing who he really was. After a while, Hexar felt he was at his limit, and gave up a bit of his power. Most of despair and a fragment of the 6 others in a potion bottle, in the hopes that someone would take his place while he recovered. But unknown to him, while he would still be alive, the small percentage of his powers left on the surface would gradually turn back into their original form to balance out his corrupted abilities. He vanished further underground, where he would regain his former self, but his powers wouldn't be enough to hold a form on the surface, let alone to try take over again. Despite being banished, however, ponies were still arguing with each other, so the goddesses had no choice but to put an enchantment on Equestria. Snow creatures called Windigos that would freeze everything in their path, and would only be destroyed when ponies learned to work together again. After several months, the goddesses took back the Windigos, and Equestria continued to be peaceful for a while.
Further south lived the country of the dog-dragon hybrids called Canems. They were a peaceful, generous species that spent their resources in helping the community, and none was shown greater than the royal Canems, who harnessed the power of nature, similar to Satyra of the goddesses. The current rulers at the time were King Lucho, word for light, and Queen Suelia, word for sun. However, when Suelia was pregnant with the next heir, a tragedy occurred. Hexar appeared in front of King Lucho one night in hopes of recruiting him after he laid a trap, placing a vase for the oblivious king to pick up and somehow steal. After giving up despair, Hexar found it his mission to try and gather some apprentices to power up his 6 remaining components. So he figured the next step would be to corrupt the most generous species in the world into greed. Luckily, the 2 rulers were able to stop him from going any further with his recruitment. But Hexar declared that if they had a son, he would be taken away to be the next apprentice of greed. The 2 rulers, terrified, covered up the hole Hexar had created with their magic, hoping that no innocent bystander would stumble through. Fortunately for the 2 rulers, a baby girl hatched out of the new egg. They called their daughter Deara, the Canem word for beloved. Many years had gone by. Deara was kept under watchful eye by the king and queen, in fear of being taken away by Hexar. Though so far, the god down below would have kept to his word. Things had changed, however, when Deara was 10 years old. When she was practicing magic one day, a Canem boy had bumped into her in hopes of catching a butterfly. His name was Sophiros, a Canem word for ferocious, who had run away from the nearby orphanage just minutes before, due to being teased by the older pups about his love for catching butterflies. She brought him to see her parents and pretended that she had conjured him up with magic. With this lie in place, the rulers decided to train him into becoming the next king. With Deara's help, Sophiros was able to fool the rulers so that he could conjure animals up with ease. And in return, Sophiros was able to help Deara with diplomatic situations. After many weeks of training, the 2 pups were crowned as the future king and queen. Even though Sophiros came clean about not being a true royal, the family still accepted him as the new king. Sophiros and Deara would undergo further training to properly take on royal duties for when Lucho and Suelia retired, and they managed to rule peacefully for a few years.
About 11 years after Hexar had vanished and left his component of despair behind, Aurora and Hesperus had 2 daughters, Celestia and Luna. When the 2 were just fillies, their parents would often leave Canterlot to attend royal missions. This would mean that they would be alone in the castle sometimes. One of those times, 11-year-old Celestia and 6-year-old Luna decided to cure their boredom by making a clay doll. The doll was black with white outlines and 2 dot eyes. Luna named it Tenebris, the pony Latin word for darkness, mostly because of her black appearance. For a while, the 2 fillies would carry their creation with them. It did cause some looks from the other citizens, thinking it was some kind of bad omen. After a while, they stopped taking Tenebris along with them to outings. It wasn't until 5 years later when something changed. Luna, now 11, was playing with the clay Tenebris with Celestia, now 16, working on an experiment to bring an apple to life. Things went horribly wrong, however, when Luna accidentally threw the clay doll into the science lab where Celestia was working. Something was brought to life, but not from the potion that Celestia was working on, but rather something else, the bottle left by Hexar. The 2 fillies soon noticed that their clay doll had come to life as a small filly, and soon Tenebris was accepted into the family as the 3rd daughter of Aurora and Hesperus. Tenebris was pretty happy with her new family. She got to discover so many things as a living pony. For example, her favorite meal ended up being chocolate cupcakes. Her sisters would often take her to the bakery just to get some. When her first half-swarming came around, everyone in the family had a role they could play in the festivities except for Tenebris. When she tried to help out, she felt like she was in the way. Afterwards, she decided to light one of the fireplaces to warm up the room. Little did she know, however, that she would accidentally burn that wing of the castle. Her family went to check out the flames but couldn't teleport out due to the stress of the fire. Tenebris put out the fire and got her family out safely. She even made the effort to get presents for them. This would be her best half-swarming, since things only got worse for her from that point on.
1 year after Tenebris was brought to life, Luna and Celestia were helping their parents raise the sun and moon with magic, with Tenebris staying on the sidelines. With this, Luna was able to get her cutie mark in raising the moon. While everyone celebrated, Tenebris was ignored as she wandered back to her room. Feeling her sadness, the god Hexar kidnapped her through the ground. Though she was wary about who he was, he promised he could fulfill her true potential, her true powers. With this in mind, Tenebris was ready to be taken under Hexar's wing and learn everything he knew. Unaware, of course, that this was a potential trap. 1 week had passed and Tenebris was still missing. With her family devastated, an old stallion gave a tip about where she was. Though the stallion was actually possessed by Hexar in order to trap the family as well. Tenebris, however, was excited about the possibility of her family coming to visit her and showcase her new powers. Hexar decided now was the perfect time to train her, with her powers to get rid of sadness. He told her to use him as a dummy for the experiment, but nothing happened. After multiple attempts, Hexar discovered that all of that time up on the surface had snuffed out most of her power. So, with much reluctance, he amplified the component in Tenebris. By the time her family came down to see her, it was too late. With the amplified despair, Tenebris had transformed into a minion for Hexar and started attacking everyone. Before things could get any worse, though, Hexar's sisters came to rescue the royals and sent them into a deep sleep before transporting them back up to the surface. Hexar declared that his sisters couldn't keep Tenebris away from him forever, and that as soon as she woke up, she would be back in his control. Once they were back on the surface, Hurika erased everyone's memories of the past week, including Tenebris. And Lumina put a spell on the underground, making it slower down there in hopes of Hexar not being able to attack. The next day, no one remembered what had happened, or whether Tenebris wasn't feeling hungry at breakfast, so Celestia and Luna took her to the bakery. What was supposed to be a fun day ended up becoming a tragic one, as Tenebris attacked the baker. She drained black smoke from him as he collapsed on the ground in tears. Afterwards, she said she felt full. With the sisters worried, they took her to the local zebra, Zelina, in hopes she might know what was going on. Zelina confirmed that Tenebris has a talent for collecting grief and sadness from other ponies, and it would only get worse if Tenebris' anger was amplified. After Tenebris accidentally took grief from Zelina, she rushed back to the castle. Even though her sisters comforted her and told her they were going to get rid of her curse somehow, that day would never come. 6 years later, Tenebris only grew stronger, to the point of actually enjoying the power she consumed. With no other alternative, Celestia and Luna confronted her and tried to reason with her. But she attacked them next. Suddenly, Tenebris snapped out of it, but it was too late. With nothing but hurt in their hearts, her sisters banished Tenebris from Equestria. Sometime later, Celestia and Luna would find out that their parents had gotten killed by falling from a rocky cliff, heading back home from a mission, naming Princess Celestia the new ruler of Equestria, along with Luna. Meanwhile, Tenebris ventured out into the snowy outskirts, where she discovered a cave where she could stay in solitude. In the cave, called the Demon Caves, she also found out she harbored a more magical power. She could conjure up hologram foal versions of every single pony she harmed by collecting grief. She called them Demon Foals.
3 months after Tenebris was banished by her sisters, Deara and Sophiros were expecting the newest heir. Hyrika, Satyra, and Lumina were invited to the baby shower after so many other special events hosted by the Canems. As they were enjoying the party, the goddesses discovered that Queen Deara was sick with a cough. They hoped that the cough would go away in a few weeks, or at least not interfere with Deara's pregnancy too much. 6 months later, it was time for the royal egg to be delivered. However, Deara's illness had gotten so much worse at this stage. It got so bad, in fact, that the plants around the Canem lands were slowly dying with her, which panicked the citizens. After the egg was delivered by the nurses, Queen Deara did not have much time left. King Sophiros did all he could to keep his wife alive for as long as he could. She was able to name her child Liaco, which was the native word for little. She passed away soon after, giving her husband the responsibility of looking after the kingdom and the future heir. The goddesses soon found out about her death and were invited to her funeral. Even they could see that the grass was becoming brown and couldn't do anything to help. Citizens became distraught and furious with the king, judging him by the fact he wasn't a true royal and couldn't perform life magic to save their kingdom. The king did have faith that his daughter would hatch soon and bring life back to the Canem lands, but that day never seemed to come.
10 years later, the egg still wasn't hatching. Sophiros' patience was slowly dying away. During this time, he put a spell on his guard and the guard's family to help them survive without food, but it turned them smaller and gave them red eyes. Given the name Pixie Canems. Horrified by this, the other citizens ventured away from the kingdom in search of food for themselves. So the population was already declining, even without death. Once he had perfected the spell again on the nurses looking after the egg, there was hardly anyone left to govern. The king considered possibly taking over the Pony Lands, which was rich and plentiful thanks to the help of his friends the goddesses. But he took down this idea very quickly. That is, until a smoky figure appeared, Hexar. The god persuaded Sophiros to be his apprentice of greed, and so he could have enough power to help his kingdom. Hexar told him to capture the goddesses, so then his land could be restored. Sophiros refused, since the goddesses were his friends. Hexar still convinced him anyway, and the king turned black with vengeance. With this new power, Sophiros was now planning to take over Equestria first, and if that failed, he would kidnap the goddesses to help his land. Meanwhile, Tenebris was still isolated in the demon caves until she heard a voice calling for her. That of Princess Celestia. She warned Tenebris of the dangers of King Sophiros' prophesied attack upon Equestria, and asked for her assistance. Tenebris agreed, since she desperately wanted to return back and prove herself. After she showed Celestia her power to conjure and control demon foals, Celestia made a deal with her. If her demon foals could aid in the war against King Sophiros, she could return from banishment. However, if she failed, Tenebris would never step foot in Equestria again. Tenebris accepted the deal, confident that she would succeed. King Sophiros and his minions of Canems advanced into the Equestrian borders. Many Equestrian guards went up against the huge species, but lost their lives in the process. The king used a special sword called the Sword of Destruction to wipe them out. Tenebris started to put her plan into action. However, her plan backfired when she found out she couldn't control the demon foals out of the demon caves. With that revelation, the demon foals ended up joining the Canems and destroying the many soldiers that went to fight. Celestia and Luna decided to go search for an alternative method of getting rid of his armies, whilst Tenebris tried to control the demon foals as best she could. In the library, the princesses found a way to get rid of them, the Sonic Rain Boom. Celestia decided to perform it, even though she would only be able to use it once. As she did so, Hyrika assisted her in the spell. The Canems with King Sophiros were wiped away from the grounds. But so was someone else. Tenebris. When Tenebris woke up from where she landed, her appearance had changed. She became smoke instead of clay, and her eyes turned red. This sonic rain boom got rid of the last stretch of sanity inside Tenebris. Therefore, her component of despair would finally take control of her, and she swore revenge over the next pony who could perform a sonic rain boom. After the attack, King Sophiros ended up severely weakened, so he then commanded his guards to capture the goddesses to provide food for them. They were successfully trapped in a special cell that would render them as souls if they tried to escape. Hyrika decided that she should be the only one to escape to ensure Equestria's safety from future threats. She then escaped and would spend the next centuries venturing to find a worthy vessel to help free her sisters. In the meantime, King Sophiros would slowly drain the goddesses of their power, but no matter how much power he drained, he wouldn't have the power to create life like his wife did. This would start to have a negative effect on the future generations of Canems, mainly the guards he put his spell on. However, he still kept the goddesses trapped in hopes that they would agree to help him with his land, instead of having their power drained away.
With despair and greed successfully recruited, Hexar began to assign his other 5 components. Of course, he couldn't recruit all of them at once, since they kept getting defeated. The 3rd apprentice, Queen Chrysalis of Lust, tried to take over Equestria, but the pillars got rid of her and her changelings. The 4th apprentice, King Sombra of Tyranny, managed to enslave the Crystal Empire until the princesses banished him under the ice. The 5th apprentice, Lord Tirek of Gluttony, got sent to Tartarus after his brother, Squarpan, warned the ponies of his attack. The 6th apprentice, Discord of Disharmony, was blasted by the elements of harmony, wielded by the 2 princesses, and was turned to stone. It wasn't until 1,000 years ago when Hexar's 7th and final apprentice was revealed, Nightmare Moon of Envy, or Princess Luna. After the pain of banishing Tenebris, Celestia felt even more heartbroken, banishing her other sister for becoming evil. Nightmare Moon was then banished to the moon.
70 years ago in Cloudsdale, 2 sisters were anxiously waiting for important results. And it was the younger of the 2 sisters, Bluestreak, who got a scholarship to become the newest recruit of the Wonderbolts at only 18 years of age. Word spread like wildfire, and congratulations were in order. Soon after, Bluestreak set off on her training. Of course, her first day didn't go so well as she crashed into the cafeteria. Though this accident didn't have any major injuries, she still felt the doubt of belonging on the team. From some encouraging words from her coach, she was able to improve her flying skills in time for the first show. When that time came, Bluestreak became the headlining act. However, dark clouds were drawing ever closer to the area. Fierce winds rendered Bluestreak powerless against the hurricane and getting to safety, until a flash of lightning struck her unconscious. 3 months later, her family and coach noticed she was slowly starting to wake up again from her coma, and when she did, she mentioned that she had a dream where she woke up in some caves surrounded by these creatures called demon voles and met her future granddaughter. Her coach questioned how she was still alive after that lightning strike. It ran in the family as being resilient to lightning. After a few weeks, Bluestreak was able to fly with the Wonderbolts again. Sometime later, she also met a Wonderbolt stallion called Thunderstark. He had 2 more years of experience as a Wonderbolt, so he taught her many tricks. Over time, the 2 of them fell in love. A few years later, they wed in a chapel in Ponyville and started their new life together. Many years after they wed, Bluestreak had her daughter Firefly, and shortly after her birth, Thunderstar got caught in a twister and was killed in the process. This left Bluestreak to look after her daughter by herself.
19 years ago, the last of the Canems had vanished when blizzards covered the land. Many Canems were dying due to the cold. That was the case for the parents of 2 Canem boys who passed away while the rest of the family migrated, leaving the 2 boys alone. They then decided to sit by the castle trying to keep warm. The 11-year-old brother was called Brucus, word for brute, and the 6-year-old younger brother was called Arcus, word for armor. They were soon discovered by King Sophiros, who took them into his warm castle and were given a place to sleep. Sometime after they settled in, Brucus was offered the opportunity to become a guard for the king. As much as Arcus wanted to, he was still too young to become one. As 4 years went by, Brucus became a very trustworthy guard, with Arcus still waiting to become one. Arcus then decided to see if he could finally get the royal egg to hatch. The egg, however, was being kept in close guard by the nurses who helped deliver it 1,500 years ago. As Arcus was being ushered away, the egg had finally hatched. The daughter Liaco was indeed tiny, roughly the size of a human baby compared to the 100-foot-tall king. With this, Arcus was then ready to become a guard alongside his brother. As the years went by, the nurses took good care of Liaco, as the 2 guards patrolled and obeyed every command the king gave them. Despite them taking good care of Liaco, it didn't prevent her from getting picked on by other Canems because of her size, and so she had to deal with that by herself whilst she was growing up until the nurses finally left when she became a teenager.
Meanwhile, back in Equestria, Bluestreak had quite the family. After her husband passed away, she looked after her only daughter, Firefly, and in the future would look after her daughter, Rainbow Dash. Rainbow was Bluestreak's biggest fan in her last few years, and the little filly dreamed of becoming a Wonderbolt because her grandmother followed that same path. During the summer when Rainbow was 10, she performed a sonic rainboom while racing some bullies at flight camp. There, she earned her cutie mark. When her quinceanera was happening, Rainbow had invited a ton of ponies, including another flight camp filly, Fluttershy. But she was still waiting on her grandmother to show up. Worried, she rushed over to her house, but discovered her lifeless body slumped over the couch. Bluestreak's funeral was organized shortly after. As Rainbow Dash cried over her grave, Bluestreak's soul had suddenly disappeared along with her body. Reason being is that a drop of Eudica's powers had made its way to talk to the ghost of Bluestreak. It turned out that Rainbow Dash was the new vessel Eudica chose in order to escape King Sophiros. With this drop of power, Eudica reincarnated Bluestreak into a male tortoise. Now, he's been told by the goddess to find Rainbow Dash in 10 years when she moves to Ponyville. Maybe it was because Eudica knew what tragedy was going to befall Bluestreak much later.
Meanwhile, Tenebris decided to initiate her plan to get revenge after she witnessed the sonic rainboom for a second time. She waited until Rainbow's demon foal would arrive to try and gain her trust and control her. However, when Tenebris listened to Rainbow's story, the filly turned into a ruby. Tenebris soon discovered that the ruby was a replicant of an element of harmony that she heard about. It was then time to move on to Plan B. Since Rainbow's demon foal didn't have enough grief power as the other fillies, since it was only the death of her grandmother, Tenebris decided to go back in time to kill Bluestreak 5 years earlier, disrupting the timeline. Instead of a quinceanera, Bluestreak passed away on Rainbow's 5th birthday. And so with that, Rainbow's demon foal wouldn't arrive for that occasion since she hadn't had her cutie mark yet. In fact, it wouldn't arrive for quite some time. Despite this, Eudica was still able to bring Bluestreak back as a tortoise because of the imbalance of the timeline. When Rainbow Dash moved to Ponyville, it was time for the tortoise Bluestreak to come out of hibernation and venture off to find her. When trying to find her in the marketplace, Blue was almost run over by a runaway cart, The tortoise is saved by Fluttershy, who was busy getting carrots for her pet bunny Angel. Blue stayed for a week in Fluttershy's care until a pleasant surprise arrived. Rainbow Dash would be looking for a pet. Blue kept having doubts about being able to reach out to Rainbow in his tortoise body, but luckily, Fluttershy was able to pick up on the worries thanks to her ability to understand animals. She consoles the tortoise and gives some encouragement. In the trial of the Ghastly Gorge, Blue finds Rainbow Dash trapped under a boulder. He saves her and carries her back to the top of the gorge. Rainbow decides to call the tortoise who saved her, Tank. Soon after, Rainbow Dash gives a tour of her house, as she would be looking after Tank now. Things were pretty rocky at first since she couldn't fly for a whole week. Tank kept sleepwalking due to the high altitude of Rainbow's cloudominium. Fluttershy comes over to help out with the situation, and they figure out a way to get Tank to sleep. Rainbow sings a lullaby that was once sung to her as a filly. That does the trick quite well. 9 months later, Rainbow prepares for her first winter together with Tank, but is saddened to know the news from Fluttershy that he would have to hibernate. Rainbow does all she could to keep winter from coming in order for Tank to stay with her. She even goes as far as going to the weather factory and nearly destroying it. Rainbow feels depressed when things don't go well. Her friends come to comfort her about the situation. Fluttershy blatantly tells her that winter will be petless, causing the Rainbow Mare to sob uncontrollably. The next day, she feels that she's finally ready to say goodbye to Tank and reads a bedtime story. After that's done, she heads back to her house, still saddened by his departure. Then she goes to sleep by the fireplace. While this is happening, Tenebris feels a gigantic amount of power flow through her, and Rainbow's demon foal finally arrives, but she's a demon mare. Tenebris confronts her, hoping to gain her trust, but the demon mare, Iris, starts to recall memories from her previous iteration. She tackles Tenebris to the ground, thinking to outsmart her. But Tenebris kicks Iris to a wall and takes over her body. Before that can happen, Iris takes out her element of grief and transfers it into someone else. Young Bluestreak from 70 years ago. Tenebris then fully takes control of Iris and disguises her in order to take Rainbow's grief. With this in motion, Rainbow locks herself up in her house for most of the first month of winter, with none of her friends seeing her for that amount of time, up until Hearthswarming. At Hearthswarming, Rainbow Dash gets a mysterious gift, a compass watch. The watch is actually the next phase of Tenebris' plan, to grant Rainbow's wish of spending a day with Tank in the winter. For a while, this goes very well and Rainbow is happy for the first time in 3 weeks. With this wish granted, a spell is cast to make sure no one else comes near the watch. Twilight Sparkle, suspicious, tries to confiscate it but ends up getting a small shock. She along with Rarity go to an artifact specialist with some photos she took the day before, the day Rainbow got the watch. The specialist, Madame Cleos, is able to uncover some information before she loses the source of the magical power from Tenebris' disguise. Meanwhile, Rainbow discovers that Tank has gotten very sick. When Fluttershy tells her to put Tank back into hibernation to get him well again, she reluctantly agrees. However, Tenebris' spell forces Tank not to be able to hibernate. As the watch, she lets Rainbow know that Tank only has 3 days left to live before he succumbs to the illness. Though she also mentions a cure that could break the spell in the form of a riddle before she explodes out of the watch. While this is happening, the good Tenebris is still trapped with evil Tenebris. Rainbow's contact with the watch also showcases the spirit of Heudica, who has planned a way for Tank to be cured. With Heudica finding a solution, she tells the cure to good Tenebris. Look to save your pet. Unique ditty must be sung and then you're set. Love to your tortoise I might add, look for a herb unusual and bad. Adding the Rainbow Goddess stone, but choose correctly. If the wrong one's sung, your feelings forever will be stung. Take the green and the blue and merge it with fire, then you'll receive your true desire. Good Tenebris lets Heudica know that she can't know the entire cure, otherwise evil Tenebris would be onto her. So she requests Heudica to erase her memory of meeting with her before she confronts her evil counterpart. Evil Tenebris gets the cure from good Tenebris without the last 2 lines. The first letter of each sentence initially spells lullaby, except for the last 2 sentences, which Heudica hides in Fluttershy's hibernation book in small letters. Fluttershy and Rainbow head over to Canterlot to let the rest of the main 6 know of the current situation before heading to the princesses. Princess Celestia reveals the one who sent the watch was Rainbow's demon foal, or rather, Tenebris. though they don't reveal that much, only that the Demon Falls were responsible for the loss of thousands of lives. Tenebris reveals herself in a smoky figure requesting that Rainbow Dash is the only one to face off against her, while everyone else finds the cure. After some tearful goodbyes, Rainbow ventures off. The rest of the main six research the cure and split off to find the ingredients. Pinkie and Applejack find the herb, Spike and Rarity find the stone, with Fluttershy finding the song, the full lullaby Rainbow's mother Firefly sang to her. But little did they know that finding the cure was a distraction to kidnap Tank and prolong his treatment. Meanwhile, Princess Celestia and Luna guide Rainbow Dash to the Demon Caves where the Demon Falls reside. They mention that Rainbow will need to find 5 gems, the Gems of Grief, in order to fight against her own Demon Fall. With the doors closed behind her, Rainbow ventures off to find the 5 gems through the 5 of 6 realms: failure, loss, disappointment, cruelty, and harshness. It turns out that the 5 gems belong to her friends' Demon Falls, and in order to retrieve them, she will need to listen to all 5 of their stories and comfort them. Twilight with her fear of failing, Applejack with the death of her parents, Rarity with her first fashion show, Fluttershy with the death of some bunnies she was looking after, and Pinkie with her first party in Ponyville. Once Rainbow collects them all, this begins to have a negative effect on her friends back in Ponyville, whose cutie marks have become black and they start to have nightmares based on their Demon Fall stories. Even after getting Princess Luna to help with their problems, she admitted she couldn't do anything to help. Though the day after, their cutie marks become the colours of their respective gems. It was at this moment where Luna mentions it could have something to do with activating the gems later on. In the 6th realm, Despair, Tenebris, disguised as Iris, welcomes newly arrived Bluestreak, who recently arrived from a terrible hurricane storm and got transported forward 70 years due to Tenebris messing with the timeline. Iris tells Bluestreak that in order to get home, she will need to collect 5 gems, the same 5 gems that Rainbow has found. She also warns Bluestreak that due to how big the demon caves are, she'll be in there for a long time and start to forget her memory. Luckily, Blue finds Rainbow and introduces herself. Due to how long she had already been in the caves, she had completely forgotten where she came from. It's not until Rainbow tells Blue how her grandmother died on her 5th birthday that the Scion Pegasus figures out who Blue really is. A younger version of her grandmother. With this new realization, the 2 ponies head over to the Realm of Despair where they face Iris. Iris mentions that she killed Rainbow's grandmother 5 years earlier in order to become a demon mare, but Bluestreak pokes holes in her argument and Tenebris finally reveals herself. The entrance closes with rocks and Rainbow tries to fight against Tenebris. However, even with all 5 of the stones, she doesn't know how to activate them. Tenebris mentions that she wants to finish what Rainbow had started, to get rid of winter. She transports herself into Rainbow and takes over her body. Before she's fully taken over, Rainbow lends Tank and the gems over to Bluestreak, and the 2 of them transport out of the demon caves. And then, Rainbow gets fully taken over by Tenebris. Meanwhile, Bluestreak safely transports back to Ponyville with Tank and warns Rainbow's friends of the upcoming dangers. However, it is too late when Tenebris as Rainbow Dash arrives and kidnaps them, leaving Bluestreak and Tank along with the CMC behind. In a special cell in Tartarus, Tenebris lets Rainbow know of her plan to get rid of the Sonic Rainboom so she can safely take over again, plus her backstory on how she was banished. Afterwards, Tenebris corrupts Rainbow's friends into hating the Scion Pegasus. Bluestreak, still in Ponyville, uncovers some memories of before she got transported, as well as some levitation powers despite being a Pegasus. She accidentally summons the cure to Tank's illness and hides it in her mane. After reporting the current situation to Princess Celestia and Luna, they send Bluestreak, Spike, and the CMC to the location of the main 6. Bluestreak uncovers another power, the ability to telepathically talk to Rainbow Dash despite being trapped in Tenebris' mind. Blue puts her powers to good use and sets the rest of the main 5 free from Tenebris' spell, also adding the final gem with Tank. Tenebris heads over to her sisters for one last negotiation before she plans to destroy Equestria with her plan to get rid of Winter. With her sisters not agreeing to take her back, Tenebris goes with her plan and with Rainbow unable to stop her. Bluestreak, the CMC, Spike, and the main 5 enter back into Camelot to try and figure out a way to stop Tenebris. Bluestreak then figures out that the 6 gems will be able to stop her. Time is crunching, however, when Bluestreak remembers she's in a coma and only has 15 minutes before she wakes up back in her own time. Luckily, Applejack remembers when she first experienced grief, activating the gem her demon fall came from. The others do the same and fight up against Tenebris. Bluestreak decides to go inside Tenebris alone and give Rainbow Dash the cure. With this last goodbye, Blue turns elderly and gives Rainbow the last piece, the lullaby. Doing this also unknowingly puts some of her soul inside, which would be materialized later on. It's revealed that she composed the lullaby while she was in the caves, thinking of how she could help as her future role as a grandmother. All three ingredients along with the gems of grief turn into a heart-shaped locket. Elderly Bluestreak then fades away after wishing Rainbow luck. Rainbow is finally able to use the Sonic Rainboom against Tenebris and blasts her away. After everything is restored, Tank has finally died from the illness. Rainbow attempts to cure him by singing the lullaby, which activates the locket and miraculously saves his life. With everything okay again, Rainbow then waits 3 months for him to finish his hibernation. It's only on the next winter wrap-up that she's able to see him again and spend the next 3 seasons with him. After Tenebris was blasted by Rainbow's Sonic Rainboom, Utica believes that she is ready to further the next stage to setting her sisters free. She gives up one of her components, Rain, and secures it in Tenebris in the form of a brooch. However, the brooch is left behind shortly after the impact. Tenebris then gets transported to the Canem lands. Not only that, but she is stripped of her grief powers and becomes a navy blue earth pony with a sky blue mane, purple glasses, and a yellow vest. She then overhears the 2 guards of King Sophiros discussing his next move onto Equestria. Before Tenebris could head back, she is stopped by a smaller Canem. It's Sophiros' daughter Liaco, now at 15 years of age. She manages to get Tenebris back to Equestria by heading north. With her new look, however, she decides to call herself Nistee as a fresh start. After a week, she makes it back into Equestria and plans her next meeting with Rainbow Dash. 6 days after Tank woke up from his hibernation marks 1 year since he had been Rainbow's pet. Shortly after, Derpy arrives on the scene and gives Rainbow a letter from Princess Celestia. It's an invitation to a formal gathering to celebrate the defeat of Tenebris. Also mentioned is a special surprise that would be unveiled later that evening. With this in mind, Rainbow thinks the surprise will be for her to become a Wonderbolt. And all throughout the evening, she is more than hyped for that outcome. However, instead she is named the Color Goddess after Princess Celestia figures out how she's able to perform a Sonic Rainboom. She casts an enchantment spell on Rainbow's locket, more than likely to activate her powers in some way. In disbelief, Rainbow doubts herself. It's here where Nistee finally confronts her. Rainbow is fearful at first when she finds out her true identity, but Nistee clarifies that she wouldn't have any reason to hurt her again. She warns Rainbow of the upcoming dangers with King Sophiros and mentions that she's the only one that can defeat him, but that she will also be able to train her to prepare. With Rainbow's friends convinced, the 2 of them head to the princesses to warn them. Nistee still keeps her identity a secret whilst warning them though, since she's still worried about what her sisters would think if Tenebris had returned. As they walk through the corridors, Nistee still doubts how long she'll be able to train Rainbow before she's found out. As Rainbow comforts her by saying she shouldn't feel so blue, that's actually a code word for the spell Celestia set to come to life. The soul that was locked in the locket 3 months ago had come to life. Bluestreak in the form of a genie. She mentions that she has the power to manage Rainbow's new powers and will provide great help for her. Rainbow shows Nistee around Ponyville before heading over to Twilight's castle, where a room is already provided for her. Nistee tells Rainbow of how she made it back. Afterwards, the 3 of them, along with the main 6, have another celebration for Rainbow's 1-year anniversary of Tank, aka the Tankiversary.
Meanwhile, Liaco doubts about what to tell her father, who still plans to take over Equestria. She decides to confront him and tell him about Rainbow Dash, in hopes that he would back away. Though he doesn't know that she doesn't support his plan, so she sounds fearful in her hopeful words. King Sophiros, however, sees an opportunity with this knowledge, finally discovering where Utica has escaped to. He declares that he would need to get rid of Rainbow first, before he can claim Equestria as his own again.
The next day, Rainbow starts having a dream featuring Utica, who guides her for the road ahead. She's later woken up by Nistee, who takes her to Twilight to do some research. Twilight uncovers one of the special history books that only she and Princess Celestia have read. They find out more information about King Sophiros, how he is 100 feet tall, for example. Meanwhile, Applebloom, Sweetie Belle, Scootaloo and Spike discuss a brooch they found. Unaware to them, it's the same one Utica left 3 months ago. They discuss whether they should try and find their rightful owner, despite Sweetie Belle's desire to keep it and Spike's desire to simply eat it. Afterwards, Nistee, Rainbow Dash and Twilight Sparkle go outside to start their training. The main aspect being Rainbow transforming into her goddess form, which involves her becoming the same size as the goddesses, the same height as King Sophiros. The rest of Rainbow's friends soon gather around and see the spectacle. However, after carrying a tree of her magic, Rainbow transforms back and falls unconscious. This makes Nistee doubt whether she'd be ready. Meanwhile, this also makes Rainbow doubt whether she'll be able to become a Wonderbolt either. A couple of days before, a wild brown bunny called Holly wanders towards Fluttershy's cottage. There, Angel is getting scolded for not getting what he wants. She confronts him and persuades him to be nicer to Fluttershy. From trying carrots to being affectionate, Holly teaches Angel many tips. However, with all of these tips, Fluttershy begins to suspect that Angel is becoming more independent and doubts whether he'll ever need her. The worst case scenario is that he'd become a father and leave her behind. Angel notices that Holly's teachings are pushing Fluttershy further away, so he gives up. The next day, he apologizes to Holly and admits he actually loves her. Holly also admits that she used to be a pet bunny before she was abandoned. She didn't want the same thing to happen to Angel. Meanwhile, on the way back, the CMC head with Applejack, who finds out about the brooch. They soon come across Fluttershy's cottage where they see Angel and Holly nuzzling each other. Soon after, Nistee and Fluttershy find them. Fluttershy is in complete shock when she sees Angel with Holly, that she runs away in tears, fearful that the two of them could get killed by Timberwolves just like the other experience she had when she was a filly. Nistee sees the brooch and makes a connection, that it belongs to Utica. The brooch magically binds to her mane and she heads home.
Back in the Canem lands, Lumina doubts whether using her magic from a cell is truly worth it when she could just escape. Satura rebuts her argument, saying Equestria couldn't last if they both rendered to just souls either. However, Satura reaches the limit of her powers. Like Utica, she gives up her components: animals, trees, and ponies. She turns grey and lifeless in Lumina's arms. The components turn into 3 brooches, one of them ending up in Fluttershy's cottage. The next day, Fluttershy discovers that the animals are sick and the trees are withering. The brooch of animals appears in front of her, but before she could figure out where it came from, Angel drags her outside to showcase that Holly is also one of the victims of the illness. Discord materializes and tries to figure out the problem, but it turns out that his magic can't fix it either. He notices the brooch and puts it in Fluttershy's mane, making a pink vest appear. The spirit of Satura lets Fluttershy know that she's become an apprentice of hers, the Earth Apprentice of Animals, and that her duty would be to find the bearers of the other 2 brooches. Meanwhile, Rainbow confronts Nistee about dreams she's been having recently, how she would see a blue Pegasus in them similar to her. Nistee discovers that Utica has been giving Rainbow guidance inside her for her entire life, thus the reason Rainbow could perform the Sonic Rainboom and how Utica escaped. Fluttershy comes rushing in and lets the others know that they need to find the other apprentices. With the brooch that Nistee already has, she figures she's Utica's apprentice of rain. They find the apprentice of trees with Applejack, and the apprentice of ponies with Pinkie Pie. At night, Fluttershy continues to look after Holly and discusses her worries to Discord. With her wishes, Angel is finally able to communicate with Fluttershy using the brooch's powers via telepathy. Fluttershy apologizes as he does the same. Back in the Kingdom Lands, Liaco tries her best to see Lumina after Satura disappears, but is stopped by one of the guards. She laments on what her life would have been like if her father wasn't a tyrant. At dinner, she accidentally reveals that another goddess had escaped and lies about needing to use the bathroom to check on Lumina. Lumina reveals that she had been growing weaker and weaker after Satura left. She then collapses as her power slowly runs out. Before Lumina completely loses consciousness, she tells Liaco to search for the other apprentices in Equestria. Liaco heeds her last wish and prepares to finally go against her father. The next day, the sun and moon fail to rise. Thus, Rarity and Twilight figure something must have happened to Princess Celestia and Luna. Because of Lumina's sacrifice, they both discover brooches, questioning their origin. Luckily, the princesses are alright, they just can't raise the sun or moon. The spirit of Lumina approaches Twilight and Rarity, letting them know that they have two of her components, time and radiance. Spike also joins them later, discovering he has the third brooch, fire. Rainbow's locket locates them in Canterlot after flying through the night sky for some time, causing both Rainbow and Nistee to join them in Canterlot. It was an indicator that the powers of Lumina were close by. With their new apprentice powers, Rarity bestowed Radiance to Ponyville. Twilight used time magic in Canterlot, and Spike used his fire powers in the Crystal Empire. In the spirit realm, all three goddess sisters finally reunite, having faith in their apprentices in setting them free.
On the way to Equestria, Liaco encounters a disembodied voice that encourages her that she's doing the right thing. The voice doesn't reveal too much about herself yet. Though unknown to Liaco, she is the spirit of Queen Deara. Liaco keeps her beliefs strong and continues further north. After 1 week has passed, King Sophiros finds out from Arcus that Liaco has escaped. When trying to spy on her, he discovered that the spirit of Deara is protecting her from being spied upon, so he instead decides to spy on Nistee.
1 week passes since Nistee started training Rainbow Dash, so Twilight and Spike treat Nistee to pancakes in bed. This becomes ineffective when Nistee ends up being late to Rainbow's training session and passes out. She has a nightmare with Celestia, Bluestreak, and Rainbow Dash accusing her of the past things Tenebris had done. She wakes up and decides to properly apologize to Bluestreak, but the genie lets her know that she has the wrong Bluestreak to apologize to, talking about the two halves of her soul. Nistee and Rainbow head over to the Cloudsdale section of the graveyard to apologize to Bluestreak properly. However, it starts to rain. This is where Nistee's true apprentice powers reveal themselves. Ghosts from the graveyard appear from their resting places to enjoy the rain, and Nistee can see them. However, with this new power, it's discovered that Bluestreak was never buried in her grave, and some magical force took her soul and body away. It happened when Hurika transformed her into Tank. This freaks Rainbow and Nistee out even more.
Meanwhile, Liaco finally makes it to Equestria and encounters the main six, who are now all struggling to manage the goddess powers by themselves. A miracle does occur, however, when Holly is cured and forgives Fluttershy for thinking something terrible would happen to them. With that relief, the apprentices prepare for their journey to the Deadlands. Rainbow decides to take Tank with her, who only walks out of the bag in search of something. Bluestreak decides to follow him. When he stops, she discovers another brooch that transforms her into a Pegasus. She became Hurika's second apprentice.
With the full team gathered, they head south through the Everfree Forest. On the first night, they make camp. Fluttershy is woken up by a whispering voice and decides to follow it outside. What greets her is a cloaked figure that attacks her. The next day, everyone else searches for her. Liaco and Pinkie find her with Pinkie's apprentice powers. Fluttershy is found on the ground crying and thinking about how she let the two bunnies die from a Timberwolf attack as a filly. But with the mention of a whispering voice, Liaco thinks it's a mysterious voice that attacked her. The spirit of Deara confirms it wasn't her, and that she would never attack another living creature. Liaco meets up with Rainbow, Twilight, Spike, and Bluestreak as they head back to the campsite, but before they could go any further, they head towards screams deeper in the forest, Applejack and Rarity, who have been attacked by the same thing as Fluttershy. As they rush back, they also discover Pinkie had been attacked. Fluttershy reveals Tenebris as the culprit for the attacks, making everyone else worry about Nistee. That night, Nistee has a nightmare where she encounters Sophiros. He summons Tenebris to fight her. However, Nistee loses the fight and gets fully taken over by Tenebris. She attacks Rainbow many times, but Rainbow manages to dodge each attack. Twilight and Liaco are woken up from the commotion, but Twilight is then attacked by Tenebris and left in a tearful stance. Rainbow decides to use her goddess powers to get rid of Tenebris. Nistee tearfully apologizes for letting Tenebris take control of her. As 4 nights go by, Sophiros talks to Nistee again and lets her know that he's responsible for Tenebris returning, specifically when she fell unconscious the day she ate too many pancakes. He lets her know that his plan is for Rainbow to keep getting rid of Nistee's curse until she's too weak to fight him, and that the curse will commence again at midnight. Nistee wakes up and travels further into the forest by herself. Rainbow catches up with Nistee and persuades her to come back to help in the upcoming battle, despite the dangers Nistee is trying to avoid. Rainbow breaks down, saying she can't defeat Sophiros if he's capable of bringing her old enemy back. Nistee takes off her brooch, finally removing her vest, and gives it to Rainbow to look after. As midnight strikes, she becomes Tenebris again.
The next day, the guards are busy looking after the troops for the upcoming battle. Arcus has doubts about Sophiros' trust in him and decides to confront him. While trying to get his attention, Sophiros puts a spell on the apprentices to let them forget who Nistee is, in hopes of them not being able to chase after her. Arcus confronts him, breaking his crystal ball. Brucus catches up, and overhears Arcus would be better off dead than take any more of the king's orders. He hears a sword swipe, and discovers a pool of blood. Sophiros mentions that he had disposed of Arcus, leading Brucus to believe that he was murdered by the king himself.
Meanwhile, Rainbow ends up depressed after Nistee's disappearance, worrying both Bluestreak and Tank. Sophiros' spell takes effect on everyone except Bluestreak, Rainbow, Tank, and Liaco, who figures out her father is responsible for their memory loss. Liaco confronts them all at once and accidentally restores their memories during a speech. Fluttershy goes to Rainbow Dash to try and comfort her. Rainbow breaks down, saying it was her fault that Nistee ran away. The others comfort her until she feels better and is ready to confront Sophiros. Deep in the forest, Nistee manages to keep Tenebris' urges at bay. Sophiros appears in front of Nistee as a hologram, saying that at the stroke of midnight, she will transform into Tenebris permanently. The only way that she would be able to prevent this from happening would be to kill Rainbow Dash before then. Sophiros puts another spell on Nistee that would convince her to go along with this plan.
Meanwhile, the group gets closer to the Deadlands and sees the sad state of it. They head toward the dungeon and give their components back to Satira and Lumina. Rainbow also uses her locket as well as Nistee and Bluestreak's brooches to bring Hurika back. They try to escape a second time, but they still have the outcome of turning into souls. They mention the only way to set them free this time would be destroying King Sophiros. They transfer their components back to the apprentices, but before they lose consciousness, they mention to Liaco that they were good friends with her mother. The apprentices set off to King Sophiros' throne room hoping to find him. Sophiros appears in the dungeon instead and confronts Liaco. She finally lets out what she believes in front of him. Sophiros mentions that she sounds just like her mother, who believed in peace and harmony, but ended up in a dark place. Seeing the sword Sophiros had with him, Liaco thinks that she was murdered by him. She's then captured by Brucus, who throws her in the tiniest cell, in fear something bad would happen to him. After being unable to convince Brucus to join her side, she breaks down and is comforted by Deara, who tells her the story of when Sophiros was a noble king. Deara finally reveals herself and encourages Liaco to go against her father's morals with her new powers.
Meanwhile, the others are assisted by Brucus, who takes them to the throne room. Instead of the king, however, they're greeted by Nistee, who is still under the spell to kill Rainbow. Rainbow tries to convince Nistee to snap out of it, but it proves in vain. The others then use their apprentice powers to try and contain her, before Rainbow gets rid of the spell. The clock strikes midnight as Nistee realizes that she will transform into Tenebris permanently. She begs Rainbow to kill her instead, in which Rainbow refuses, as well as everyone else. Nistee then falls to the ground in pain and fully transforms into Tenebris, breaking her glasses. Sophiros joins her soon after, finally meeting Rainbow Dash for the first time. Tenebris goes ahead and taunts Rainbow, even going as far as stealing her grief. Liaco then comes rushing in and reminds her father of his late wife in hopes of finally stopping his plans. This does nothing to change his plans, however. As Tenebris is tasked with rallying up the troops for the attack, she is stopped by the apprentices. She takes their power away with ease. Rainbow tries to attack Tenebris, but is stopped by Sophiros as he flicks her against a wall. Rainbow quickly gets up and summons Bluestreak, powering the genie back up to full strength. She then transforms into her goddess form and uses various attacks on the king. As none of them seem to affect him, however, she attempts a sonic rainboom, but is stopped by magical glue which he summons. Blue swears at him for cheating, but is flicked against a wall and loses consciousness. Tenebris meets up with the troops and showcases a screen, with King Sophiros about to dispose of Rainbow. He pulls out his weapon, the Sword of Destruction, capable of killing any spirit that lives inside. However, this triggers a past memory of Tenebris, and she turns back into her uncorrupted self. Tenebris flies to the rescue and tries to stop Sophiros from using his sword. When that doesn't work, she flies in front of the sword, fatally injuring her and making a crack in Rainbow's locket, causing Rainbow to shrink back to her normal size. The component of despair is broken in half in the process. Sophiros' sword fades into dust, but he shrugs it off, believing nothing would be able to go up against him now. Rainbow then hears Nistee coughing in the distance and runs to her aid. After comforting Rainbow, Nistee dies in her arms. In disbelief, Rainbow tries to heal Nistee with her already cracked locket. It ends up breaking into several pieces as Nistee disappears. Rainbow faints in the process. Meanwhile, guards are issued everywhere in Equestria, warning everyone about the upcoming dangers. Discord has other plans. He opens a portal to the Canem lands, taking Angel and Holly with him.
1 hour goes by. Rainbow wakes up in the goddess's cell with everyone else. After being reminded that Nistee had died, she lashes out her anger and sadness on the jail gate. Fluttershy tries to stop her, and then Rainbow finally breaks down and grieves as everyone else comforts her. As Rainbow feels better, Discord, Holly and Angel make their way through the portal and let the others know about the riddle in the hibernation book, the same one Hurika left. They figure out that the blue is Bluestreak and the green is Tank. Hurika reveals that those two lines were part of the original cure for Tank, and that they also revealed something else, that Tank was the reincarnated version of Rainbow's grandmother. Bluestreak's spirit tells her backstory via Nistee's brooch powers. Brucus then rushes to the group to warn them that the troops are almost at Equestria. He also confesses that he misses his brother Arcus and that he would never be as brave as him. Arcus is then revealed to be alive and well. He was only wounded and kicked outside, but he was still able to tend to his wounds. The attention goes back to the goddesses when they have one last way to defeat King Sophiros, with all three of them going inside Rainbow Dash with the last of their power. Though this would restore the Canem lands and Sophiros back to their previous state, it would also kill Rainbow Dash in the process. Her friends grieve for her upcoming sacrifice, but Rainbow decides to go along with the plan. The troops of Canems get super close to Equestria's borders now. Princess Cadence in shining armor are summoned after they gather up the guards, ready for attack. Sophiros projects himself as a hologram and lets them know that nothing would be able to defeat him now. However, Rainbow comes in the nick of time in her goddess form. The others use their brooches to transfer them to Rainbow. She grows 2 times the size of the king and finally uses her sonic rainbow on him. Liaco runs towards her dad and protects him with her life magic. They both end up in a white space where the spirit of Deara greets them, finally breaking the bond the component of greed had on him. The Canem lands are now covered with flora and fauna, and Sophiros shrinks down to only being a little bit taller than Liaco. Night falls, and Fluttershy tries to wake Rainbow up with no luck. The others mourn her sacrifice as Rainbow's spirit also cries for her departure. She's greeted by the goddesses who comfort her. Hurika lets Rainbow know that she can have her life back if she gives something up, her sonic rainbow. She also lets her know that the Sonic Rainbow's power is strong enough for 2 lives in exchange, meaning that Nistee could also be brought back. Rainbow wakes up and tries to do a Sonic Rainbow with no use. She's then convinced that Nistee is alive and well and heads back home. Nistee wakes up in the hospital and is greeted by her sisters. She discovers that as well as being revived, she had also been transformed into an alicorn by Hurika. It turns out that Celestia and Luna knew Nistee's secret all this time. Nistee breaks down by this revelation but is comforted by her sisters, happy to not be separated from them again. She comes out of the hospital after fully recovering and is greeted by the others, with Rainbow being extra relieved to see her. Afterwards, Celestia holds another formal gathering to honor Rainbow Dash in bringing peace back to the Canem lands. During her speech, Rainbow also thanks Nistee for her victory. As a reward, Rainbow finally becomes a fully fledged Wonderbolt. Spitfire congratulates her and looks forward to a Sonic Rainbow in their future performances. Nistee lets Spitfire know that Rainbow sacrificed it to save her life. The goddesses also appear at the gathering as surprise guests, and are thankful for being able to interact with the ponies again. Rainbow soon was training with the Wonderbolts in no time. Liaco was crowned the new queen, helping her father out with the kingdom. Angel and Holly had 3 children, with Fluttershy and Discord being very proud of them, and Tenebris settled into her new role as the Princess of Hope, Nistee Lux Tenebris. Shortly after the formal gathering is over, the official coronation would be held for Nistee, where she would receive her official crown and other royal regalia. Afterwards, Luna would show us some other places around the castle, while Celestia performed her royal duties elsewhere. She told Nistee of how Hesperus and Aurora perished after Nistee was banished, and how that resulted in her turning into Nightmare Moon over the course of 500 years. As 1 year passes, sparks start to fly between Nistee and Rainbow Dash. Though Nistee had already realized her feelings for Rainbow ages ago, Rainbow was more in denial during this time. It wasn't until one New Year's Eve where things would start to take off. After being confronted by her friends as to what she was feeling, Rainbow gets the courage to ask Nistee out. However, some magical disturbance forces everyone to forget what happened on that night, or that it ever happened. The component of despair. Hexar, knowing that Rainbow is the key to freeing Nistee from his control, completely erases the memory from everyone's minds. With this forgotten memory, Nistee and Rainbow take more of a slower burn to their romance than they did before. Hexar would project nightmares into Nistee's head, using a manipulated version of the forgotten memory, to stop her from confessing again, while Rainbow was too invested in the Wonderbolts to take notice of what she was feeling. Unfortunately for Hexar, Hurika's spell to make Nistee an alicorn protected them from becoming enemies at least. It wouldn't be until Cadence's child, Flurryheart, would turn 5 for the final stage of Hexar's plan to commence. 5 years after Nistee becomes a princess, Equestria has been without a crisis and she is well adjusted to her new title. On the day of Flurryheart's 5th birthday, Nistee is encountered by a mysterious merchant who tells her about 7 warriors. Unknown to her, this merchant is the god Hexar in disguise. Even when he says that Nistee is one of the 7 warriors he had been searching for, she politely declines and says that Rainbow would be more suitable. That night, Nistee starts to question if being a princess is what she really wanted, or if she could be so much more. Meanwhile, Hexar decides to corrupt Rainbow Dash with his half of despair since giving it back to Nistee didn't work out. In doing this, Rainbow falls unconscious after taking a bite of cake. Nistee takes her back to a Cloudominium and decides to stay with her. The next morning, Nistee has a dream about a filly screaming. She wakes up from it realizing that she stayed the entire night. Rainbow is then taken to the doctor where she accidentally feeds on his grief like Tenebris used to. Nistee hurries back to Canterlot where she sees a letter. She reads it saying that Rainbow will become Hexar's new component of despair in 7 days if Nistee doesn't face Hexar himself. She ventures to Celestia to know more about him, but Celestia tells her to go to the goddesses. They tell her that Hexar is their younger brother whom they banished. They also reveal that Hexar is Nistee's biological father, since she was born from his components rather than corrupted by one like the other villains. Nistee goes to warn Queen Liaco of the upcoming threat so she could protect King Sophiros. With this, Liaco also decides to go with Nistee down to Hexar's lair. Before she does, however, she stumbles across her grandfather Lucho's journal, which explains about the gateway Hexar left that could only be opened by a royal Canem's magic. Meanwhile, Hexar manages to gather his 3 remaining apprentices, Chrysalis, Sombra, and Tirek, to prepare for his revival, which also involves forcing his other apprentices back onto his side.
The next day, Nistee goes to say goodbye to Rainbow, who is still suffering from her illness. The other members of the main 6 and Spike accompany her to the Canem lands by train to see them off, with Spike deciding to stay in the Canem lands for a week to spend time with Liaco's family. The goddesses also visit them to give them some important items: magical stones that can keep an eye on the apprentices, and a watch to showcase the difference between the time on the surface and Neverquestria. After saying goodbye, Liaco opens up the gateway and the 2 jump in, sealing themselves off. They fly down into the hole and use their magic to light the dark tunnel, using the stones to track down Tirek, Chrysalis, and Sombra. On the way there, Nistee's visions about the screaming filly return, but before Nistee can explain them, they come across some ground sprites called Palapi and Lapali, who are the guardians of Neverquestria. At first, the sprites forbid Nistee and Liaco from passing through, as they are scared of what Hexar could do to them. They reveal that their village had been destroyed by the beings that came before: Chrysalis, Tirek, and Sombra. Nistee and Liaco promise to restore their land if they're let through to stop Hexar. The sprites agree and let them pass. Meanwhile, Hexar commences the next stage of his plan: to corrupt Luna, Discord, and King Sophiros again in the form of invitations. Luna is the first victim. After she reads the letter, she ventures over to the Tree of Harmony to take a look at the element of loyalty, which is slowly getting corrupted by despair. As she flies off, she suddenly screams and falls unconscious in the southern region of the Everfree Forest. Discord is the next victim, who is introduced to the invitation by Fluttershy and collapses. While asleep, Rainbow has a dream about her meeting a dark figure called Grizio, who is Rainbow's dark self once she succumbs to despair. Grizio tells Rainbow that it's only a matter of time until the component turns her into a villain like the others. Rainbow wakes up from the nightmare and finally understands the turmoil that Nistee went through as Tenebris. Suddenly, Rainbow is forced to sleep again, but this time it takes the form of a coma, while Grizio manifests inside. The next morning, Discord and Rainbow Dash are brought by the main 6 to Princess Celestia, asking for guidance from Luna. But much to everyone's dismay, she is brought in by the guards in the same state as Discord and Rainbow. Celestia worries that Hexar is trying to turn them back into villains again, including Rainbow, who has taken Tenebris' place. Meanwhile, Liaco and Nistee make it down to Hexar's lair, 15,000 feet below the surface. With the watch given to them, Nistee also deduces that it's 10 times slower in Neverquestria than it is on the surface. Nistee has another vision about the screaming filly, but this time there is a dark silhouette she finds familiar. When the vision ends, Nistee and Liaco head into the castle. They are greeted by Chrysalis, who plays a harmless changeling shift prank on them. As they make their way through the castle, they meet Hexar for the first time. Nistee recognizes him as the silhouette from her vision, but denies this as she doesn't remember meeting him. Hexar dismisses the memory loss as just being a long journey for them and guides them to their room before a banquet is held. Once alone, Nistee lets out her anger and sadness, saying the banquet is only an excuse to bide their time while she's desperately trying to save Rainbow. Liaco comforts Nistee whilst also being reminded of how Spike thinks about her. Queen Chrysalis summons them to attend the banquet, where they talk to the other apprentices. They manage to get under Nistee's skin, which causes her to glow orange. Scared to make a scene, Liaco distracts the other apprentices into talking about themselves before making a getaway. They head back to their room to discover their gems are glowing yellow, green, purple, and orange. Nistee stops glowing as she finds out the other apprentices are in trouble, and Hexar has just corrupted King Sophiros. Hexar approaches them and tells them to come to his headquarters for a potential deal. Nistee and Liaco agree to follow him. They enter his headquarters and Hexar negotiates the deal. If Nistee stays with him and takes on disharmony, envy, and greed along with despair, the other apprentices will be free from his control. Nistee agrees to the deal but is stopped by Liaco, saying that she wouldn't be happy with this life, and neither would Rainbow. Hexar interjects since he knows for a fact that Nistee was happy staying with him the first time, with Nistee further mentioning she's never met him. Hexar finally goes into revealing the screaming filly in her visions is her, or rather filly Tenebris. He tells her of the time she got to know him better but was corrupted by him to attack her family. This realization causes her to blindly attack Hexar and slowly turn into Tenebris once more. But this in turn also speeds up Rainbow's transformation into Grisio. It's only stopped when Rainbow's scream reaches out to Nistee, snapping her out of her anger. She turns back into herself with one arm still tainted. She also finds out from Hexar that Chrysalis, Sombra and Tirek were innocents he corrupted to charge his elements up. With this in mind, Nistee tries to convince them that Hexar is just using them, which they deny completely. She asks if anyone they loved tried to stop them from getting too powerful. They admit they did, but they're long gone. For Chrysalis, it was a prince she admired called Fawnroot. For Tirek, it was his brother Squarpan. And for Sombra, it was a mare named Radiant Hope. Before Nistee can convince them further, Hexar fully corrupts his other apprentices into joining his side. His castle begins to fall apart. One of the sharp rocks cuts off most of Nistee's mane as she attempts to dodge it. As they teleport back to the Canem lands, Liaco and Nistee can only look in horror at the tragedy that is to come.
As Hexar brings upon destruction with his apprentices, Nistee sinks further and further into despair, slowly transforming into Tenebris again. After Liaco snaps her out of it, Nistee thinks of a plan to get everyone back to normal, by somehow getting the anchors of all the apprentices and using Hexar's belief of balance against him. Liaco gives Nistee her rainbow stone just in case she might need it, whilst Liaco stays in the Canem lands to protect it from her father. Nistee ventures to Canterlot and convinces the main five, Bluestreak, Tank, and Celestia to help her look for some answers, while Fluttershy puts some bandages on the arm that is corrupted by Tenebris. The goddesses witness what's happening and send Nistee a scroll with a spell inside. Nistee recites the spell and it sends her to a treehouse with a familiar zebra, Zelena. Zelena lets her know that the way to get the anchors for Chrysalis, Sombra, and Tirek is to uncover 3 hidden memories. One that was hidden when she was separated from Hexar, one she got rid of to protect Rainbow Dash, and the fireworks memory during that one New Year's. By uncovering these memories, she transforms the rainbow stones given by Heudica into 7 separate stones showcasing the anchors. The 7th one reveals that Nistee is Rainbow's anchor. After Nistee wakes up from the spell, Hexar has revealed that his apprentices have already conquered every part of Equestria in her absence, with Grisio confirming this fact. Nistee tries to unleash the power of the new stones she gained, but is conflicted when she's tasked to fight against Grisio on top of the new memory she's just obtained. When Grisio threatens her, Nistee snaps out of it and channels power from the stones. However, this is actually speeding up the process of Nistee turning into Tenebris again, which is part of Hexar's plan. He reveals that the times that she was forced to become Tenebris were all according to plan for her to become another god of sin just like him. Nistee charges at him, only for her bandages to come off and flinch. Hexar uses this to his advantage and flings her all the way to the Canem lands, where she drifts into unconsciousness. Nistee wakes up in a dream where the black corruption has reached one of her eyes, and she is glowing orange again. She is approached by the anchors of the apprentices as well as Zelena, who tell her that she can't suppress her anger anymore. While Nistee is still afraid of Tenebris coming out, Zelena lets her know that she will be protected. Nistee wakes up and confidently lets Tenebris take over, fully accepting her faults, but instead of the evil form, she transforms into a goddess with the anchor's powers. However, Hexar's components have finally reached full strength and transfer back to him, leaving his apprentices mindless, including Rizzio. Hexar attempts to split his components in hopes that Nistee would join him in bringing darkness to Equestria, but because of balance, Nistee realizes that two gods of sin cannot coexist as the evil components thrown at her gradually turn into good ones. She then uses her new goddess powers to slowly fuse Hexar's components together and reunite the apprentices with their anchors. This causes Hexar to slowly shatter. His sisters comfort him and admit their actions towards him were just as wrong as Hexar's beliefs. As they hug him one final time, Hexar uses the last of his strength to stop Nistee from fusing the two despairs together, and his amulet shatters. Discord, Princess Luna, and King Sophiros are all turned back to normal and reunite with their loved ones. Queen Chrysalis, King Sombra, and Lord Tirek also revert back to how they used to be. The former three swear to help the newly reformed apprentices in any way they can. The purified components then vanish into the sky. Meanwhile, Nistee finds out that Rainbow failed to turn back from Rizzio and is left as a mindless husk that is slowly fading away. Nistee tries and tries again to fuse the despairs together, but now that she is back to her alicorn form, that level of magic would destroy them both. With the realization that she might never see Rainbow again, she finally confesses her true love to her without Tenebris stopping her. She kisses Rainbow, fusing the two despairs back together. Rainbow finally turns to normal, but breaking the curse also gives them both heterochromia, reminiscent of Utica's eye colors and Nistee's mane. The fragments of all 7 components finally show themselves to Nistee, revealing that she was actually a goddess born in an alicorn's body, and that her true powers would only show themselves after she felt hope and despair at the same time, breaking Hexar's despair curse on her. Hexar's plan had made her a Halday, a beacon of what his powers should have been. Rainbow and Nistee start dating 1 week later and live happily without any strife. During their first hearth-warming together, Rainbow was shown to be a caring partner as she listens to Nistee's conflicting opinions of her father. With Bluestreak's help, Rainbow comes up with a last-minute present for Nistee, a snow globe of past Hexar playing with a filly Tenebris. 3 years later, Nistee has a nightmare about outliving Rainbow Dash. Once again, Rainbow is there to comfort her and decides to propose to Nistee, marking a new chapter in their lives. 2 years after the proposal, Rainbow and Nistee's wedding is approaching fast. Also in those 5 years, 2 more couples are happily married to each other, Discord and Fluttershy, plus Spike and Liaco, who are expecting their first child. The chosen date of Rainbow and Nistee's wedding, however, is also the 20th anniversary of Bluestreak's first death, which gets Tank concerned. Bluestreak comes up with a plan to make the wedding even better by transforming into Rainbow's grandmother one last time, with Utica's assistance, even when they can't be changed back and their lifespans would be much shorter. After the wedding, Bluestreak takes this opportunity to give Rainbow something she wasn't able to give before: closure. She fades away with Rainbow finally being able to say goodbye to her. They leave one last present, a replica of Rainbow's locket with a baby tortoise inside. Nistee and Rainbow welcome this new addition to the family, naming him Tanky. 5 more years pass as it follows the 10th anniversary of Hexar's defeat. A Harmony Festival is being held in the Canem lands. Liaco and Spike have a son called Canis who is now 5 years old at this point. Nistee is also the new ruler of Equestria, with Rainbow ruling beside her, plus being the captain of the Wonderbolts and the Royal Guards. Everyone gathers in the Canem lands for the celebration, including the rest of the main 5 and the past apprentices of Hexar who are doing much better. King Sophiros has retired, with Tirek helping him out. Discord is happily married to Fluttershy, with Sombra rekindling his ruling in the Crystal Empire. Chrysalis and Luna have grown extremely close and have even begun to date. As everyone walks to enjoy the festival, the ghost of Bluestreak temporarily splits into the ghosts of Tank and the Genie version and watches over them, concluding the story. Thank you so much for sticking around and watching this lengthy vid of lore from my 3 audio dramas. And I also want to give thanks to Equestria Exploration, Magpie Pony, Pianopod, and Sour Patch King for helping me narrate the different sections. And finally, thanks to all of you for supporting my channel during these 3 productions runs. Though this marks the end of these characters' journeys from me, I'm still going to be working on stuff in the future. Will there be audio dramas? Fanfic readings? Who knows what the future holds? Next year will mark 10 years since I started my channel, and you bet I'm going to have something special planned for that day. Till next time, this is MuseScript signing out.